Everyone, my name is Pat Smith, and I'm happy to be here with you today. I'm especially thrilled with the job I've been given to introduce our speaker this morning. I think whether we're here, for whatever reason we're here in this room today, whether we're here as a professional in the field of chemical dependency, whether we're here as an employer, and I particularly applaud employers who are here because your presence certainly indicates that you care about your employees, or whether we're here as a loved one or family member or friend of a recovering person, or whether we're here as a recovering person. Whatever we're here for, I think this morning we're probably all here to grasp a deeper understanding of this thing called recovery. What causes a person, what motivates a person to make the change of mind that moves them toward a different direction in life, but more especially what causes the change of heart. I think that's the issue. What motivates a person to make that spiritual transformation that leads them in a different direction in their life? And the speaker we have here this morning has been a great inspiration to me, so I feel very privileged to introduce him. Bob Earl has become a renowned speaker. He shares his experience, strength, and hope, and he brings the gift of freedom and love to those folks who have a problem with chemical dependency or any other dysfunction, family dysfunction. So I'm very pleased and proud to introduce to you this morning Mr. Bob Earl.
Good morning. It's nice to be back here in Virginia where it's very cold. I come from Tucson, Arizona. We're not experiencing exactly this weather. I'm a consultant for Sierra Tucson, and they love to market in the east this time of year because they have this great slideshow of the desert and lakes and cactus and sunshine and mountains, and it's usually a bigger hit than the speakers are by the time they're done with the program. I was listening to the list of people who might possibly be here, from recovering people to professionals involved in the field to employers to loved ones of an addicted person, and my heart went out to the employers and the loved ones because I am an addicted person and I've been in recovery for 30 years, and I thought for an employer to take the time to come find out a little bit about addiction, it shows me what Pat says, that you care a little bit and also you're concerned about your bottom line. I used to be an employee, and I can sum up my entire employment history by telling you that I never left a company that 30 minutes after I was gone, they didn't change every lock in the place. My relatives could always tell where I was working when Christmas came because that's what they got, for Christmas. And I think that's the thing about the alcoholic and the addict that the non-alcoholic or the non-addicted person doesn't understand, is why we're the way we are and why we do what we do. And it is mystifying because people within a modicum of sense will say to somebody who perhaps gets up every morning, runs 10 yards down the driveway into the side of a tree, at some point they would go to their neighbor and say, "Have you ever thought about not running down the driveway into the side of the tree?" To which the alcoholic or addict would respond, "No." And they would go back up to the top and run into the tree again. And when I got into early recovery, I didn't understand it either. I came into recovery, I was 26 years of age, and I was living in the streets before it was fashionable. And I was mentally pretty deranged. By that time, prison seemed like the only option I had left as any hope of getting any time clean or sober. And when I began to recover, I had this one constant reoccurring question. I couldn't figure out why I had gone to the lengths that I went to completely blow my mind with drugs and alcohol. It just didn't make any sense to me. And I would ask this question of people, and I would say, why? Why? How come? I want to know. How come I can't believe I did what I did? I look back and say, no person in their right mind would do this stuff. And they would just smile, and I would get what at that time was the party line answer in recovery, which was, it doesn't matter why. It's not important. It is only important that you don't drink today. Well, that's true. It's only important that you don't drink today unless you're being driven totally insane by the question why. Because then if you're driven totally insane by the question why, there's an excellent chance that you will, in fact, drink again if somebody doesn't answer this stupid question for you. And it took me 17 years of recovery to find out the answer to that question. And that came about when I was 17 years recovered and crazier than a loon. Absolutely nuts. There's an interesting dynamic for a great many of us who are addicts and alcoholics who go into recovery. We get sober for a small period of time, and then we begin to get crazier instead of better. So it takes a lot of courage, I think, on the part of the people who stay recovered. I'm one who got nuttier day by day for 17 years. If you can even begin to conceive that, coming in a raging addict, alcoholic, and going crazier one day at a time, you know. You had taken away from me the very substance I needed to maintain my sanity. So now, to get to the why, I'd like to talk a little bit about dysfunction in the family. That is a major player in the world of addiction. We learned about family dysfunction thanks to the adolescent treatment facilities. Because what would happen was they'd get an adolescent in for drug treatment, and they'd have them 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, however long their own specific program was. They'd work with the kid. They'd get he or she off of the drugs, off of the alcohol. They'd teach them some living skills. They'd get them around. They'd teach them to communicate, and the children would begin to have some compassion and some feelings, and they'd be in group, and they'd be working, and they'd be communicating. They'd learn a little bit about limits. They'd learn a little bit about boundaries. They'd learn a little bit about confrontation, and they'd be doing okay. And then they'd, give the kid a little citation or a chip or a diploma or something and pat him on the fanny and send him out and send him home. And about 6 months later, the kid would be back worse. And their behavior under the influence of drugs and alcohol this time out was worse than their behavior before they got into treatment. And eventually, it dawned on the people working with the adolescents, something is wrong here. And it's got to be in the home, because what we're doing is we're treating these children, we're getting them in shape, and we're sending them back in the home, and they're going into the toilet, and they're dying. So, any rational society, and I do not consider ours a rational society, if their children were dying, they would make it a number one priority. Well, our children are dying, and we're not making it a number one priority. And the reason that I believe that we're not making it a number one priority is because the information is very threatening. The information is this: if you did a less than thorough job of nurturing and loving your children and providing a safe space for them to grow up an individual power with an individual personality, you can have contributed to their addiction or their alcoholism or just their basic absence of self-esteem. Okay? My family, where I come from, is pretty traditional. My father was an alcoholic. My mother was a non-alcoholic. My mother was a child beater, a very good one, a Class A award-winning child beater. If they gave awards for such things, she would get one. I, unfortunately, was her only child. I was beaten so some people understand that one, yeah. Siblings are nice to have around sometimes because they can pick up, part of the heat. That's right. Particularly if you're the oldest sibling. If you're the youngest, you can get the heat from the siblings too. Family dynamics are fascinating if you ever start to look at them. I was beaten so severely my 5th year of life that I missed so much school that they wouldn't even give me a grade, because my mother couldn't let me go to school. She couldn't let the authorities, even in those days, and nobody much cared then, see me. When I began school, I had trouble in school. I'm an exceedingly bright person, and I was classified as a slow student. I had an attention deficit. They didn't have the terminology then, attention deficit. In those days, you were called slow. And they said it a lot like a venereal disease, He's a good boy, but he's slow, Well, of course I'm slow. I'm growing up in an environment where there's an addiction in full bloom. And there is one common denominator out of homes where there either is an addictive parent who is drinking or using drugs or a mentally ill parent, and that's tension. For the children, there's constant tension. It's almost like the hum of a neon sign, like that energy. It exists in the house every time you wake up, every time you go to bed, every time you come through the door. You have no idea what's next. None. I couldn't bring kids home from school. And also, you're beginning to think that you're mentally ill as a child because your questions are not being answered. I could come home, find my father horizontal on the floor, out like a light, right? 6 years old, say to my mom, "What's the matter?" The answer's standard. Nothing is the matter. Your father's tired. He just laid down to rest for a while. In the middle of the living room, this is, I want you to understand it, on the floor, right? As a child, you rely on these parents to validate your perceptions. So if I come into the house, I see my father horizontal on the floor, I feel that something's awfully wrong here. And I say to my mom, "What's wrong?" And my mom says nothing, then I think there's something wrong with me, not something wrong with the scene, because I don't have enough of a self yet to overpower my beliefs, the belief system of my parents. I'll give you an example. I have a daughter. She was 5 years old 2 weeks ago. So I'm very current on this parenting stuff. She's also in Tucson, Arizona right now, and my wife and I were in Charlottesville last night. It's very exciting being away without your daughter. We don't do that much, and it's kind of nice, actually. For a long time now, I've been going to write a book about she and I. My third book is going to be about our relationship. It's going to kind of be a parenting book in disguise. It's going to sort of be, I think, disguised as letters from me to this child. And up until about 4 months ago, this book was always going to be entitled Walk Self. Now, walk self is a term that came from her. When she was littler and she had begun to walk, and by the time she was about 2 and was getting, some real little power of her own. Have you ever walked with a 2-year-old? I mean, they don't go fast, So, as well-intended as I am, occasionally I'd have her by the hand, and I just would want her to come along just a little quicker than her little legs were going. Or my wife's favorite used to be to just kind of put a hand on her shoulder and just help her along a little bit. And my very favorite is I'd put 3 fingers at the back of her head, just to kind of just scoot her just a little quicker. And she'd just plant both feet dead in the sidewalk and turn around and go, "Walk self." Which means if you're walking with me, pal, you're walking my pace, or you just go on down the road, So I always loved that, and I always thought, what a great title for a book, Walk Self. And then 3 months ago, we were out, my wife, myself, our daughter, and we were with someone else, I don't remember who, and we were someplace, and I don't remember where, because what my daughter said so shorted out my circuitry, all the other circumstances are insignificant. She sometimes works things out. I love to watch her sitting, thinking, trying to put pieces together that she's gathering of information. And so she's sitting there and she's putting these pieces together wherever we were. And I love watching her face when this little mind is at work, just real busy, just humming away, And we have a thing we say occasionally back and forth to each other. We say, "You know what?" So she's doing this little process, and suddenly she looks over at me and she goes, "You know what?" I go, "What?" She says, "I'm going to miss me when I'm died." Not 5 years old. Enough of a sense of self that she knows she exists. She likes that person. I'm going to miss me. And unfortunately, because of the circumstances in our life, all of her grandparents have died since she was born. And the last one lived with us and died at home. She has a better understanding of death than I would like her to have at 5 years of age. She's lost 3 dogs, 3 grandparents, 2 cats, and numerous fish have died. So here's a little girl who has a sense of self, who likes herself, and believes she's okay. I am a little boy by the time I start into the school system, and I believe something is wrong with me. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I believe something is wrong with me. I believe somehow I'm insufficient, incomplete, inadequate. Something's wrong with me. And whatever it is that's wrong with me is awful. And if you ever find out, you, the other people in my life, ever find out what this thing is, you will either draw it to the attention of everybody in the room and embarrass me, you will leave me, or you will make me go away. So my role in life becomes showing you an exterior that looks okay, so that you'll never feel a need to look behind my front to see who lives back here. Well, as a child in school, the way the system is set up, and then that's a very difficult thing to do because they have very rigid rules that they need to follow, which are not healthy for children, but we'll get into that at another time. So my second grade teacher, Mrs. Cooney, would go up to the blackboard. I remember Mrs. Cooney very well, very large, overweight, in her corrective shoes, this monster in the front of the room. She would go up to the blackboard, she'd put up a 2 and a 2 and a plus sign and draw a line under it and turn around and look at me and go, "Bobby, what is that?" I know the answer. I'm sitting there in the front row. I know the answer. But I'm growing up in a home where I have a drunken father and a violent mother, and I live under a lot of tension. So nothing is as it appears to be in my house. So I've already, by age 7, learned don't blurt out answers. So I have to figure out a few things before I answer this question. The first thing I need to figure out is, why does this woman want to know? Okay? Because I'm being asked questions at home by parents who do not need the answer, and when I'm giving them the answer, I'm getting knocked down. Right? Once I finally have resolved to my own satisfaction that it is part of this woman's job description to elicit from me proof that I am memorizing what she is writing on the blackboard, I decide, okay, she's got a reason to know the answer. The next thing I have to resolve while I'm sitting there is, does she know the answer? All right? I am being asked questions at home by parents who do not know the answer to the question. And I'm getting hit for giving them the right answer or the truthful answer to the question. Well, while I'm sitting here processing all this, there's strange dynamics in families. Children who aren't getting enough nurturing or are being abused find different ways to protect themselves from what is transpiring in the home. Some get violent and act out, cause a lot of trouble. Others just disappear into themselves, become lost children. You can't find them. Others become funny. They try and make the whole family laugh as a means of easing that tension, stopping that hum, that ever-threatening hum. And some are what is called a family hero. In the educational system, what the family hero will do is they are going to get straight A's for the first 60 years of their life. They are going to acquire more credentials than one human being can use in a lifetime effectively. While I'm trying to resolve all my little personal problems with answering this 2 plus 2 question, unfortunately sitting next to me in the second grade, I have Susie. Susie is the family hero. Susie is going to get straight A's forever. Susie's going to make up for the fact that it's July and the Christmas lights are still on her house at home by getting straight A's. Because they have a straight A child, it doesn't matter that Dad can't get sober long enough to take the Christmas lights down. Okay, it's like, we're an okay family. Look at her grades. This is demonstration. See, that's part of what's wrong with the system, is that we put the value of the human being, we make that value a judgment against performance. And the minute you start to value people by performance, you're running into a lot of trouble. People are okay just sitting still doing nothing. All right? So, Susie is about to have a nervous breakdown because a question has been asked and there's dead silence. No one is answering it because Bobby is sitting there trying to figure out whether he can answer it without getting killed. Now, poor Susie, she didn't really mean to do this, but there's a point at which the family dynamics overpower all sense of rationale in your life. When she no longer could contain herself, before I got a chance to answer the question, she leaped to her feet and went, "For!" And Mrs. Cooney, of course, bless her dear old evil heart, smiled at Susie and said, "That's right, Susie, darling." And Susie Darling sat down, and one more time a note goes home with Bobby Darling talking about I'm slow. I'm slow. I have a problem now at recess. I have to figure out how to kill Susie. The reason I have to figure out how to kill Susie is she has committed the cardinal sin of my life. She has drawn public attention to the fact that I have difficulties. That's it. Well, how did it continue to go in the school system? Terrible. Except that by the time I was 12, I was 5'10". By the time I was 14, I was 6 feet, and the rules changed. Now, if I didn't like your class, I walked by your desk, I threw the books in the wastebasket, made some so universally accepted sign of dissatisfaction, and left the room. Okay? And nobody had anything to say to me. But I'm also 15 years old. I'm ashamed of who I am. I'm afraid you're going to find out. I don't want anybody ever to get close to me in an emotional sense because it hurts too bad. So I'm going to drive you away with my violence and my attitude and my anger. And when I'm about to explode, completely blow up and go off the face of the earth because I don't know how to play this game. I don't know how to show you anymore I'm okay when I believe that I'm not. I don't know how to get good grades. The system's killing me. They finally threw me out. They sent me to the worst schools in the city of Los Angeles. They sent me to I don't know if they still have the school there. There used to be a high school in Los Angeles called Reese. The entire staff of this high school were either currently employed as juvenile officers or retired juvenile officers. This is where you went when they couldn't handle you anyplace else, and there wasn't a lot of emphasis on education either in this school, but there was a little emphasis on control. I lasted a day, and they called my mother and said, "Get him a job. This kid shouldn't be in the system." About that time, I was at the beach with some friends, and this guy next to me said, "Smoke this. And wash it down with this, a glass of cold red wine." And I smoked that, washed it down with a little red wine, and for the first time I could remember since I was born, I didn't feel so ashamed of who I was. I actually felt a little bit okay, you know? And I could hear the waves in the ocean. Never noticed them before. You know, because I was too tense, man, too worried about you're going to find out my secret. Just on red alert. I mean, I was living my life on red alert, just hyper vigilant, like an alarm system, just going through life, right? And suddenly I'm like, a little better. It's a little better. Let's do this again. A little better. Yeah. Looked at the girl over there. Suddenly I felt like I could talk to her without threatening her, you know. "You're going out with me or I'm going to kill you." You know, I mean, it's, you get dates, but they're not really warm, you know. So, for about 3 years of drugs and alcohol there, I felt really good. Really good. They saved my life. I was a complete raving emotional maniac by the time I was 15. I was finished. I'd been thrown out by the system. I'd been humiliated every way possible. I was now big enough that I had hurt some people very seriously in fights, and I was having a lot of trouble. By the time I was 16, I'd been in already one shootout with the Los Angeles Police Department. They have no sense of humor about that stuff. But I could smoke a little something or take a little something or shoot a little morphine or drink a little something and all that went away. I felt better. And the best thing about it was I didn't feel ashamed. I know I said this once, and I'm going to say it 50 times before I'm done this morning. I didn't feel so ashamed. Whoa, that felt nice to not be ashamed of who I was. You know? So for about 3 years there, I kind of felt like I was driving a fine automobile down a smooth road. You know? It was really great. But then drugs and alcohol have an interesting chemical dynamic to them. They turn on you. And then when they turned on me, it was more like being drugged down a highway by a car, you know, that was completely out of control, and it was not a smooth highway. So for 3 years, I had 3 really good years of drinking and doing drugs and mellow and feeling okay and listening to progressive jazz and driving good cars and hanging out with good-looking women, and it was all right. You know, had guns that worked in those days. It's amazing how everything goes to hell as your addiction goes down the road. You know, eventually you wind up with guns that won't fire, you know. So, and then I had 8 years of a nightmare. And it's during this 8 years of the nightmare that you, a rational person, would have said to me, Bob, have you looked at your life lately? It's not doing too well. You're spending a lot of time in jail. You've accumulated a tremendous amount of physical injuries for a guy your age. Maybe you'd like to give this up. I don't want to give it up. I don't even want to think about giving it up. And the reason I don't want to give it up is I'm trying to recapture that moment that I didn't feel ashamed of who I was. All I want to do is recapture that moment. That felt so good to not be ashamed. Well, finally, 8 more years of this stuff, and I was, as I said, brains gone, living in doorways in Pasadena, California, and moved into 12-step recovery, which was a blessing, an absolute blessing. Changed my life. But it's 30 years later now, so I've been clean and sober over half my life. I have 30 years of recovery under my belt. I've been in recovery more than 50% of the time I've been alive. I'm 30 years sober, 57 years old. I know a lot about recovery now. Actually, more than I want to know about recovery. I think certainly more than I'm going to be able to use before I die. More than I want to use before I die. Well, let's take the recovery process a little bit. Let's talk about it. When I got sober and got a job, for those of you who are employers, I was a really good employee. Now, okay, drinking and using, like I said, man, I stole everything that was not nailed down. And I was the shipping clerk. See, I'm not stupid. I mean, I didn't carry anything out. I shipped it to myself, you know. Only idiots take it home in their own car, you know. But once I got sober, now I'm ashamed of myself again. I'm completely ashamed of myself. And one of the ways I try and make up for being such a shameful person is by killing myself for you, my employer. So I wouldn't mind working 12 hours a day and being paid for 8. Didn't bother me a bit. Didn't bother me a bit. I was just happy to have a job, happy to be earning a few bucks, and happy to have you like me. Would go to any length to make you like me. Because if you like me, then you won't confront me about anything. There's an old saying about it's very hard to dump a load of manure on a Girl Scout. You get it, don't you? You get it. You know, I'll be a Girl Scout all my life, and nobody will ever get mad at me, and nobody will ever give me a bad time, and nobody will ever confront me, and, you know, well, I'm doing the same thing. I'm sober, I'm going to work, I'm working hard. I had a lot of trouble getting a job because it was difficult. My sponsor said to me, you got to be honest, Bob. From this point on, rigorous honesty, right? So I'm going out, I'm trying to get a job, and all these stupid employment applications, it says, have you ever been arrested? I would put yes, and then it says, if so, explain. I would explain, ask for additional paper, and continue to explain, right? You know. And no one was offering me employment, but by any chance. So finally I went to my sponsor, and this is the truth, so help me God, I filled out 115 job applications in 3 months and did not have employment. I mean doing nothing. They wouldn't hire me to do anything. Finally I said to my sponsor, hey, this ain't working. You know, this honesty stuff just is not working because I'm being honest and no one is giving me a job. He said, no, you don't understand what I'm talking about. I'm talking about self-honesty, Bob. Can you give a man 8 hours of work, 8 hours of honest work for 8 hours of pay? The tragedy here is I had to think about it for a minute. I thought, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. He said, good, go get a job. So the very next application I hit says, have you ever been arrested? I put no. And they hired me. And I went to work. And I'm sweeping floors in a factory that's making concrete mixers. But I'm sweeping floors in the stock room, too. Now I'm starting to get nervous because I'm also not stupid. There's parts and they're small, which means they can be carried out. And usually in a manufacturing setting, if there's anything small enough to be carried out, they have insurance. And the insurance company, to cover everybody's behind, is bonding the employees without their knowledge, but they are running a check on them and they're bonding them so that they know. Now I'm thinking, So for 2 months I'm out there sweeping floors in the factory, and every time the door to the factory opens, my heart stops, right? It's like, I know, they found out, they're going to make me go away. I'm going to be embarrassed and humiliated again. And I remember my thing I'm fighting off day in and day out is that I'm ashamed of who I am. At the core of my being, I'm ashamed of who I am. I can't sleep nights. I'm waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning with nightmares about them holding me up in front of the 100 and some workers in the factory and saying, this man lied to us, and here's what happens to you when you lie to us, and carrying me out, and putting me in my car and disgracing me and sending me home. Finally, when I can't stand it any longer, I go back to my sponsor and say, I'm dying here. I'm dying here. He says, well, why don't you go tell them the truth now? He said, now they know who you are. They see you show up on time. They see you work hard. Go tell them the truth and see if, your performance makes any difference in how they react to your history. So I make an appointment with the personnel director of the company, and I go in and I sit down and I just dump it all on him, right? I just tell him, well, this and that, and I really didn't mean to shoot the son of a bitch, and I was only a year sober. I was talking like a lunatic, What a meeting that was. And I get all done with this guy, and I find out that I'm working for one of the companies in Los Angeles that makes it a point to hire at absolute minimum at least 2 ex-convicts out of federal prison system every year to give them a chance. And they're perfectly okay with the fact that I am who I am and that I did what I did, and they would have hired me had I put yes on the application. So I'm real good at that in life, thinking things through, making a plan, and then finding out that the plan was not necessary. After I've almost destroyed my entire life with the plan. Let's see, we have any smokers here? Are we going to need a break? Do we have smokers in the audience? Do we need a break? No? Okay. We'll go on. I don't mind. Television's gone. You can have my jacket back now. For me, this is really a costume. This is not my preferred dress is blue denim shirts and jeans. I started wearing a lot of blazers and slacks for a while. I looked in the mirror one day and I said to my wife, I said, geez, I think I'm going to stop wearing earrings. And she said, don't you dare. I said, why not? She said, that's the only warning that you give somebody that you're not what you appear to be. I got this sober. A lot of people think this is a hangover from drugs and alcohol. No, I actually got it when Tina was pregnant. And I found out I was going to be a father, and I said I want an earring. I don't know why, but I just want an earring. And so my wife is big on stuff like that. She promptly took me down and got my ear pierced, and away we went. Okay, so I get a job, I lose a job. In early recovery, I probably had 13 jobs. I lost a lot of them. I probably had 13 relationships with women, too. I was having a lot of trouble in intimate situations because I don't know how to cope with any of that. You see, this is the missing ingredient. In functional family systems, the children are given tools very early. They have strange rules in functional systems. Like, one of the things that our children are taught in a functional system is how to solve problems. This is an interesting concept. What they do is they identify the problem and they seek a solution for the problem. I don't come out of that kind of system. No one ever looked for a solution to a problem in my family. All my family ever looked for was somebody to blame. As soon as they could find who was responsible, no one did anything about the problem, right? I have a great aunt in Colorado who has an easement problem on her property. This easement problem has existed for 60 years. One of these days, somebody's going to build a brick wall across her driveway, and then the family is going to go, "Oh my God, they built a wall across Aunt Emily's driveway," right? The reason no one in the family has done anything about it is it's Aunt Emily's fault that the easement problem exists, and everybody knows it's Aunt Emily's fault, so no one feels the need to do anything about it. That's my family history. When my wife's mother was dying near the end, and we had to find information to give to our daughter, who was 3 at the time, about this woman, her grandmother, dying, I thought back to my own family. I thought, my God, I came out of a family system that no one ever died. No one ever died in my family. I have uncles who have been on trips for 80 years, but no one has ever died in my family. And they were train trips, and I have a phobia about trains to this day. So that's a skill, that's a life skill that a child gets in a functional system. Another interesting thing that they come out of a functional system with is a sense of being okay. They wake up in the morning, a child who got the proper nurturing when they were small, and they feel okay about who they are. They don't have to put on a certain amount of makeup or wear certain clothes or do something. They don't have to be task-oriented. They just wake up okay. They go through their day into familiar and unfamiliar situations knowing they're okay. What an interesting concept that is. I've often wondered what they do with their time, you know? I wake up in the morning behind, late, in a hurry. You know, things to do, people to convince, a dance to do, you know, to just to get even. I got so much work to do that by the time I get even, the day is over, and I have to start again. Another thing that children who come out of this kind of system with have, which is astounding to me, is a capacity to communicate and confront. Because as children, it was okay to confront their parents. They could stand there with both feet firmly planted at 3 years of age and say, "I hate you!" And the parent would give them a little kiss on the head and say, "Oh, that's nice, darling. I'd like to hear you express how you feel," and walk off. I never said I hate you to my mother, and I don't imagine I'd be here today if I had. My instinct said, this is not a good thing to tell her how you really feel. This could cause some real serious trouble here. And they also understand, they grow up in a system which helps them to understand that they're not responsible for the other person's feelings. So when they're in a relationship and their partner comes home feeling bad, they don't immediately take on the responsibility for this. I can't understand that. That's inconceivable to me. I have been married 7 times. I had a terrible time with relationships. I remember sitting home night after night after night waiting for my partner of the moment to come through the door to see what kind of evening we were going to have. See? Because until I found out what kind of mood they were in, I didn't know what we were going to do. Right? Lived my whole life that way. These other people don't do that. You come home, you're in a bad mood, geez, that's a shame. Like a cup of tea? No, you're not supposed to ask me if I want tea. You're supposed to take a dagger and drive it through your heart because I feel bad, you know? Well, as I'm proceeding along through recovery and getting better jobs and learning to become more of a social animal and going through wives, you know what's interesting? It's as much I'm a product of my times because I was an adolescent. Well, what little part of it I got to see through the drugs and alcohol in the 50s. And in the 50s, you got married. I mean, you got married. There was no living with anybody, anywhere, under any circumstances, for any reason, and this was even in Southern California, which is not notoriously conservative. So, when I had a relationship with a girl, I married him. Now, you might be sitting out there saying, in all those trips down the aisle, didn't you ever wonder if you're doing the right thing? Yes, actually. On more than one occasion, I was headed up the aisle towards the preacher, strolling quietly along, trying to look good, which is terribly important. Particularly at your own wedding. And this little voice inside would say, this isn't a good idea. Now, that was my intuitive voice. All children have an intuitive voice. It's the most powerful voice in their being when they're born. The difference is, in a nurturing system, children are allowed to listen to their intuitive voice. It's honored. They're encouraged to follow their intuitive voice, even when it means going against the system. They're encouraged to follow this voice. I was not encouraged to follow this voice. I was encouraged to be quiet and obedient at all costs or suffer great physical pain. So I'm walking up the aisle and my little intuitive voice is saying, this is not a great idea. This is not a good idea. I'm saying to my little intuitive voice, shut up. Okay? I'm an incomplete person here. And I will be complete as soon as I'm married to this woman. This is a gorgeous woman, and when I walk through a door with her, people will know I'm okay. And I won't have to do so much work to, let you know I'm okay. I won't have to do such a dance. So I never listened to the little voice. See, we live in a system, in this society, that supports the concept that you're not okay as you are, that you need to add things before you're going to be all right. We have an entire advertising medium built on that single little piece of philosophy. As soon as you buy what we're selling you, you'll be all right. But until then, you are incomplete, right? I mean, it's hairspray ads, toothpaste ads, breakfast cereal ads. Remember that Special K pinch an inch ad? God, I hated that ad, right? I mean, yes, I can pinch an inch. Yes, I can. Ever since I stopped shooting methamphetamine, I have been able to pinch an inch. Okay? I also weighed 135 pounds when I was shooting methamphetamine. I weigh 190 now. So they'd have this sleek, gorgeous girl in that white bathing suit laying there on the beach, and they'd say very sweetly on the television set, "Can you pinch an inch?" And I'd be sitting in the living room going, "Oh, God." And then the interesting thing is they don't hold these manufacturers to the same standards as they're now holding alcohol and cigarettes, which is you got to put warning labels on your packages. I mean, they should put warning labels for compulsive, obsessive people on these commercials, like cereal commercials. They should say, however, for those of you that are compulsive and obsessive and capable of eating a railroad car of Special K, it will put weight on you. I mean, even let's get really down to the nitty-gritty here, ladies. The douche you use? If you're not using the right one? I mean, if I was a woman, I swear to God, I would have to write letters to Mass and Gale. I mean, as a man, I find it offensive that the only meaningful conversation this mother and daughter have had in 19 years is about the douche they use. You know, give me a break here, right? And then they wonder why we're screwed up. Automobiles. Guys, right, this is the man's thing now. Cars. No offense to the ladies, but this is... and letters on the back of it. None. But there is a dynamic at work here that they understand very well. They know that when I am in a suicidal depression driving my week-old BMW 735 CSII down the highway, slumped down in the seat looking between the steering wheel and the dash because I'm so depressed, I want to die. And just as I'm about ready to floorboard it and do 150 and run it into a concrete abutment on the interstate, I see another BMW up ahead of me in the lane, and I think, well, what the hell? And I speed up a little bit until I can read the numbers and letters on the back of their car. I notice that this poor insignificant human being is driving a 735 CSI, one eye, not two eyes, right? I feel better already. I sit up a little straighter in my car like a man driving a fine automobile should, clutch the wheel with some sort of authority, put a little more weight on the accelerator, pull up past this 735 CS one eye, pull over in front of them, slow down to give them enough time to read the numbers and letters on the back of my car, so that we both fully understand who is the insignificant human being in this encounter. And then I just put the foot down a little more and roar off on down the highway, feeling really good for about 10 minutes, and then some son of a bitch in a 735 CXXX black with gold wheels smokes by me like I'm tied to a post, and I am reduced to the suicidal depression I was in 20 minutes before. They understand this stuff. They don't make these ads by mistake. They know that. They know that if I feel incomplete as a human being, they've got to convince me with their ad campaign that buying their product or their car will make me complete. You see? If you're wondering why we are so screwed up as a country, if you're wondering why we have children dying and we're paying no attention, it's because we're buying the right car. See, we've gone off the chart here. We've gone right on beyond anything rational or sane in our behavior. It's about acquiring. If I acquire enough stuff, I'm okay. Well, I'll tell you a couple interesting stories. I had an acquaintance in California who was reputed to be the second largest landlord in the state of California. It has been said by friends of his and mine who are conservative, I mean really conservative CPAs. These guys can hardly walk, they're so conservative, that this guy can go 140 million liquid in 30 minutes, which means all of his assets obviously are not tied up in land and buildings, right? So here's a man with a capacity to put his hands on $140 million cash money in 30 minutes. He drives only old beat-up cars. He lives in terror. His children will be kidnapped. His wife buys his clothes, her clothes, and the children's clothes at Kmart. This guy has multi-million-dollar homes all over the world, and at the airports in these cities, he has wrecks. I'm talking, last time I saw him 10 years ago, he was driving AMC Gremlins, okay, for cars. He walks fast, drives fast, talks fast, thinks fast, reads fast, moves fast. He can't stop for a half a second. I mean, he's moving constantly. I love to, now that I'm filled with all this information that I don't need, I like to sometimes confront people just to see how they react to truth. So One day, coming down a hallway, he's coming towards me in his usual supersonic speed, and I'm sort of sauntering along the other way, and he says, "Hi," and I said, "Hi," and I could not say it. I said, "When is it going to be enough?" And this guy stopped dead for probably 15 seconds. Now, you'd have to know him to understand what a spiritual miracle this was for this man to stand still in one spot for 15 seconds without doing anything, saying anything, or moving. And at the end of this time, he looked at me and he said, "Maybe never," and walked off. So if you're thinking that acquiring is going to do it, I don't think so. I don't think so, because I know that there's many people in this room right now today who don't think 140 million wouldn't fix it. I doubt if you'd stay for the rest of the talk, actually. Yeah. Well, how do we get to that terrible dynamic? We get to that dynamic out of believing that somehow inside we're incomplete and that we don't contain enough stuff to have happiness. I am thoroughly convinced that my happiness must come to me from outside of me. The lotteries. Why do you think the lotteries are such a tremendous success? Because if I hit it, I'll be okay. Because I don't believe that inside of me is enough stuff to have a good life. I don't believe I contain that, see? Well, children who come up in a nurturing system, they believe that they have the capacity and that they contain within them everything they're ever going to need to have happiness and success. And part of that, of course, is the ability to ask for help, the ability to go get information. Well, that's an interesting concept to me. Ask questions? Never. Never. If you ask someone a question, you are giving them proof that you don't know. And if you don't know, it means you're flawed. You see? Because children who are in a nurturing system, they never, ever get the concept that somehow the possession of information has something to do with the value of a human being. So children in nurturing systems never believe that they are inferior or superior to another person because they know or don't know something that this other person knows. They just understand that the other person either hasn't had the information made available to them or weren't interested in it when it was presented to them, and therefore have forgot it. That's not how I grew up, and that's not how I think. So I miss a lot of my life because I can't ask questions. I remember when I was 5 years into recovery, I broke my surrender to God, and he broke my back the next day. And I always knew that was going to happen, which is why I waited 5 years to surrender. Early on in recovery, someone said to me, I had a problem, and I mentioned it, and someone said to me, "Well, turn it over." I like that. That's an interesting concept, turn it over. You know, hand it to somebody. I'd love to hand it to somebody. God, anybody, please, just take it, will you? So I said to this guy, "I like that. I'd turn it over. Who do I turn it over to?" And he said, "God." I said, "Who's God?" He said, "Your Father." Not a good image. We have a problem here right now. And it's real clear now for me. Whatever you do not let God find out where you are. Okay? Because you're gonna get to do penance against your will, you know. And so my early recovery was pretty much built on doing penance. I'll tell you how tragic this consumerism concept is. This is the truth. I believe... Oh, thanks. Very thoughtful. Thank you. Very kind. I actually still have a little stash to show you that I am truly an old addict. I love that so much I forgot where the hell I was. I don't know. You never pay attention. You won't know. Yes. So, thank you. So I spent the first about 5 years of my recovery with this concept. I don't know where I got it, but I thought that if I could clean my life up to where I could get a Sears and Roebuck credit card, then I could surrender to God. I don't know why I believed that. I just somehow believed that if you were good enough for Sears and Roebuck, God wouldn't punish you. I mean, don't ask me for the logic of it because I can't give it to you, you know? I guess I just felt good people had Sears and Roebuck charge cards, and I was not a good person. And so I would have to get one. And when I got one, I could surrender. Well, I got one, I surrendered, and he broke my back. And as a result of breaking my back, I became a television writer. Of course, this is interesting now. You have someone with a 10th grade education who has failed English ever since the 4th grade. Hate English. I still hate English. And I have made about $2 million as a writer and published a couple of books, and I still hate English. And I have been a phonetic speller. Thank God for the spelling programs in computers, because they really made my life a lot easier. I mean, they spell for you. It's kind of nice. It's really a trip. You just have to pay people to fix that stuff. You know? But anyway, breaking my back is what made all that happen. I don't know where the hell I'm going with all this. This is really interesting.
Surrendering, giving it to God.
Yeah, I know. All that. I know. No, thank you. I appreciate you trying to help me, but... oh, okay. Oh, yes. Now I know where I'm going. Thank you. So anyway, I become a television writer. I worked as a television writer for a few years, and one day a friend of mine who came out of a functional nurturing system, and we had just become friends because I found out functional and dysfunctional people don't spend a lot of time together for obvious reasons. They bore me, and I scare them to death. So it's well, they're too simplistic with how they go about life. You know, mail comes, they open it. You know, they don't even. What kind of philosophy is that? They don't know how to carry it around the house and, try and divine what's inside it, what's inside this. Or the IRS. I mean, I carry IRS envelopes around for 3 days. Oh, no, God, oh, they got me. God, I'm going to federal prison. Yeah, and then I'll open it up and it'll be a letter with a $3 check. And I've been completely insane for 3 days over a $3 check. It's like... They just open the envelope. See, they open the envelope because they have skills. They have tools. Tools were presented to them when they were children. So they know that whatever the problem is inside the envelope, they have the skills and the tools required to solve it. So it's not terrorizing to them. Well, it's terrorizing to me. Absolutely terrorizing. They wake up in the morning knowing that they contain within themselves all that they are going to need to get through that day. I wake up in the morning with this mind that's been up all night on the headboard waiting for me to wake up. And the moment I open an eye, my mind looks down at me and says, "Ah, good, glad you're awake, been waiting to talk to you." And then it begins this incredibly supportive, nurturing litany. It says, well, you didn't get enough sleep. I may have had 12 hours. That's unimportant. You didn't get enough sleep. You should go back to sleep. But if you go back to sleep, you can't go to work. If you don't go to work, you're going to lose your job. Well, as tired as you are, you're going to lose it anyway because you're going to make a mistake. Oh, that's not good because now you're out of work. Now that you're out of work, what are you going to do? You got about enough money for 6 weeks and then you're in the streets, and that's not good. You're not going to like living in the streets now. You don't have the drugs and alcohol to make it okay. Oh, yeah, the little bump below your knee, it's not a bruise, it's bone cancer. How are you going to handle that? You're going to tell people, or you're just going to stay home and rot to death and be quiet about it? So I don't quite wake up with this sense of okayness that the functional person does. I wake up broke, unemployed, and dying, so I have a lot to work through before I brush my teeth in the morning. And a lot of sometimes affirmations just don't do it, Because I say 3,000 of them and the bruise is still there. I'm still dying. It didn't work. No, don't get into that, Bob. So, this functional friend who I'm getting to know comes to the studio one day to visit me. And this guy is there for 5 hours and he has a ball. I mean, he gets excited, he sees Stars of MASH and other shows that he really liked, and he's like a little kid. He's having so much fun. And I take him down to the set of the show that I was working on, and we're doing a really intricate stunt for the show, and it's crashing a car into a lighting fixture store. Okay? And in television, when you're doing 1-hour episodes, you have a very limited budget. There's no room for mistakes. So when you set up a gag like this, what they call them gags, it has to really be careful. So the car, as it drives through this lighting store, the special effects guys have set all the lights up to explode as the car passes by. And it all has to be timed perfectly. So everybody's real quiet on the set, and we're all standing there, and they set it up, and the stunt guy brings the car crashing through the wall, and the special effects guys are working their little buttons and computers, and all the lights are blowing and exploding, and it ends up against the far wall, and it's perfect. And the crew cheers, and everybody's really happy. And this friend of mine, who has no sense about how to behave, immediately walks over to the head special effects guy and says, "That was the most exciting thing I ever saw. How'd you do it?" And much to my amazement, this guy explained it to him. Right? So I'm standing there learning stuff I don't know, and I've been writing for 8 years at this time, and I don't know any of it because I never could ask anybody a question because I'm too ashamed to ask a question, because I know that if I ask a question, it means that you're going to know that I don't have the information, which means you know that I'm incomplete. So I can't learn about it. You see? So this guy comes to the motion picture studio and has more fun in 5 hours with my career than I'd had in 8 years. Right? And I had done all the work. And he had all the fun. Because he walked on that lot knowing he's okay. You see? Yeah, so he can get excited, and he can point, and he can ask questions, and he can just be. See? And he's just fine. Doesn't have to explain himself to anybody. Doesn't have to apologize to anyone for who he is. He grew up as a child with parents kissing him and hugging him and holding him and telling him he was wonderful and he was powerful and he was special. He had a father who used to hold him in his arms with tears in his eyes and say, "I'm so glad you're my son. I'm so glad you're my son. I adore you," and put him down. So I don't remember none of that. I remember a father laying unconscious on the floor. I remember a mother getting all the way back to her full height to hit me with her fist with all her might. I have no sense of anybody picking me up and holding me, telling me I'm special and I'm powerful and I'm wonderful. See? That's what it's meant when you talk about empowering children. You see? And they get this stuff real early. And you can say, "Well, God, I wasn't beating at a kid, but I still feel like I'm a little off center here, It's not about that. It's about nurturing. It's about nurturing. It's about getting the nurturing. If somebody tries to distract you from your feelings as a child, they're doing you a great disservice. So even if they're doing it like, "Oh, that's okay, don't cry, we'll buy you another one." I mean, man, you're setting up a human being who's going to go through their entire life believing that everything is disposable and replaceable. And don't grieve the loss of anything, because you can just buy another. It can be replaced. If your parents, don't want you to be angry, and they'll say, "Well, that's not important enough to be angry about," you're done for, man, because you believe that your anger is invalid. Anger is a lovely thing. It's a very, very healthy emotion when appropriately expressed. I watched our daughter. One of the things about feelings, which is fascinating to me, I mean, if somebody said to me, "What's the trick of life, Bob?" I'd say the trick of life is learning to weave your spirituality and your humanity, your humanness, into this package, into one package, and make it a package that functions together. Because I have done both exclusive of each other. After 17 years of recovery, I got so nuts I had to seek therapeutic help. And I spent about 8 years in therapy. Well, I learned about limits and boundaries and functional and dysfunctional and systems and conditions and confrontation until I was like a loaded gun. And there was no one who was God's child anymore. They were either healthy or unhealthy. They were either functional or dysfunctional, and I was ready for you, man. And if you stepped over my boundary, I came up with a machine gun and taught you about confrontation. Forget forgiveness, pal. Forgiveness was for God. Getting even was for me, Making sure you didn't step into my life. So I have spent a few years intently focused on that stuff, And before that time, I spent a few years intently focused on metaphysical practices. And I could use almost everything the metaphysical community had to offer to separate myself from my feelings. When they introduced me to meditation at Self-Realization Fellowship, it was like heroin. It was like, this is nice. I like this. I love leaving my body. Anything that will get me the hell out of my body has great appeal to me. The one place I don't want to be is here right now. Give me anything that will get me out of here, and I'm okay, right? So this meditation, I was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning every morning and meditate for 4 hours before leaving the house. Work. Sound like an addict? After I was 17 years sober, I quit smoking. I discovered running. I don't have any knees left, right? I mean, if you're going to run, you might as well run marathons. I mean, what the hell, right? That's the sad thing about those of us who are compulsive, obsessive people. You give us something that's good for us, and we can kill ourselves with it. So you can say to a recovering person, you need a little exercise that'll help you burn off the energy that you use for anxiety. It'll, give you a few endorphins. And then you turn around, the guy's running 50 miles. He's got no body left. He weighs about 12 pounds, Hasn't eaten a week. Say, hey, I like this exercise. This is good stuff, man. Got any other suggestions? We can take it to the wall. Got lost again, but it really doesn't matter. I wish I had a blackboard, but I don't. Well, I'm going to sort of draw something on the wall. Anybody got a marker? No. That would be fun, wouldn't it? Just say, wouldn't that be great? Oh, God, nobody got me a blackboard. Well, hell, And watch the promoters just go, ugh. So for those of you who can get into your child for a minute, you'll be able to keep up with this invisible drawing, and the others can just meditate for a minute. What? Can you hear me okay if I talk real loud for a second away from the mics? This is a restaurant here, and it's a sushi bar. This is a sushi bar. It's like U-shaped. And there's stools all along here and along here. And then out here in the restaurant are tables. And over here is like a maitre d' or host or hostess stand where you go to get your table. This side of the sushi bar, the case is filled with decorations. And then this part of the glass case is filled with fish. Okay, now, by this point in recovery, I've been in therapy about 3 years. I'm ready for new adventures. I'm discovering that the one constant denominator in functional people's lives is their capacity for risk and spontaneity. I always thought they lived in the same house for 50 years and they had the same job for 50 years. I didn't understand. So anyway, I'm learning all this stuff. And this friend of mine who would come to the studio with me, Jim, he comes up to me, he says, have you ever had sushi? I said, no, I never have. He says, I haven't either. Why don't we go out and eat sushi some night? And I was caught up in the euphoria of the moment and said, yeah, great, let's do that, right? You got to remember, people who are ashamed of themselves are not big on new experiences. We will go to great lengths to not have a new experience among strangers, okay? So, we, of course, had to pick a very slick, hip sushi bar on the Sunset Strip, right? And that night, as we're walking down the Sunset Boulevard towards the sushi bar, if you had looked at my exterior, I looked fine. Now, I always considered looking fine sort of bored and disinterested. I've been here before. I've done this before. There's nothing new. You can't excite me. I'm okay. I'm contained. So I'm walking down Sunset Boulevard looking okay, contained, cool. Inside, I am nuts, off the chart. Oh, why did you agree to do this, you fool? You've never eaten raw fish. You're going to get sick. You're going to throw up. You're going to embarrass yourself in front of everybody. You don't speak Japanese, you nitwit, right? I'm just hammering myself as I'm going down the sidewalk. Well, we walk into the sushi bar. Now, remember, the sushi bar is here, U-shaped, tables here, hostess stand here. We come in the door here, turn, and we face this maitre d' stand. And there's some things from your past that just seem to go away really slow.
I'm 5 seconds in this sushi bar and I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm relaxed. And the reason I'm okay and fine and relaxed is I'm also an old armed robber, right? Now, there are certain things that you learn to do as an armed robber that become part like breathing. One of them is I cannot walk into a room without telling you where everybody in the room is and the exits are within like 5 seconds. And I've yet to be able to stop that, and I make conscious efforts to try to look at the ceiling, to try and do anything to stop that. Why is it so ingrained? Because my very life used to depend on that information. Whether or not I lived or died depend on knowing where everybody was and where the doors were. So I'm in the sushi bar 15 seconds. I'm okay. I know where I'm going to sit. Here's this U-shaped sushi bar. I'm going to sit down here on this stool on this corner, see? Because then I can watch all the people in this direction and watch all the people in this direction. I can see everybody at the sushi bar, and I can watch how they eat the stuff, listen to how they order it, and I can get through this whole experience without anybody knowing that I've never done this before. This is how I live my life, by observation. Somebody said, you're supposed to participate. I said, no, that's too risky. I'd rather watch. So just about the time I relax, I hear this voice next to me, Jim, saying to the sushi chef, excuse me, sir, this is my first time ever in a sushi bar. I was wondering if you could help me out. Well, I'm standing there next to him, still looking okay. And inside, I'm finished, right? I'm like, no, man, why did you ask him? You know, now everybody knows I don't know, because if I knew, you would have asked me, why did you do that, you know? Well, poor Jim, see, he thinks he's okay, you know? And he thinks if you don't know something, you ask. What a stupid concept that is. Well, he's not done. He practically takes the sushi chef by the hand, leads him down the entire length of the sushi bar, right? While he asks him what each fish is, how do you pronounce it in Japanese? Is it something he would like as a first-time sushi eater, or is it something he should wait till he acquires more of a palate for raw fish, right? Well, one thing I learned from 3 years of therapy that I noticed that I found very amusing, people sitting at the tables were embarrassed for this poor man. They weren't even with us, and he was embarrassing them. I felt like saying, what about me? I'm with him. You think it's bad sitting there? You should be here, you know. So I'm walking along behind him, you know, putting all my energy into looking like this is information I possess and I can't understand why he's asking the sushi chef. So after this entire walk down the length of the sushi bar is over, I still had to sit down here on this corner, on this stool, and watch everybody because I didn't hear anything the sushi chef said because I was so concerned with how I looked, right? So that's the story of my life. I missed all this really good information worried about how I looked to other people. Because I'm so ashamed of who I am, your approval is so necessary for my being. Okay? How nice to be free like this man. You walk in a joint and say, hi, I'm here. I'm new. I've never done this before. Can you help me out? That's like, oh my God. Are you kidding? There are rules for behavior. This is not in there. There are procedures to follow. There are traditions. We don't do that. That's awful. And that is basically the background that most addicts, alcoholics start out with. There were rules in their life. There were traditions in their life. They have built a belief system on lies and misinformation that doesn't work. And so when we begin to drink or use drugs and we get relief, and then those of you who are not addicted can't figure out why we do it. It's because it makes me feel better. It's that simple. I feel better. I feel better for the first time in my life. And when it's gone on beyond that point of magic for me, okay, all I want is that moment back. So the pain and suffering you see me putting myself and others through is about just getting back that one moment of feeling okay. And because we don't understand that dynamic, we do really idiotic things in this country. We had the Just Say No campaign. There was a big waste of money. You know, this is really a smart idea. Just say no. Yes, absolutely. And then they ran those stupid commercials with the brainwave activity of someone on marijuana. Did anybody see those? They had this thing that said, this is the brainwave activity of a normal 14-year-old child. And then it said, this is the brainwave activity of a 14-year-old child who smoked marijuana. I thought, I know 20 million 14-year-olds are sitting out there going, that looks pretty good to me, man. Jeez, if I could just slow this sucker down for a minute, I'd be all right, you know. It might as well have been funded by the pot growers, you know. It could have. And then, because we get into this, you're either okay or you're not okay, we get this problem concept. So when these adolescents come to us and they're addicted, we see them as problems instead of resources. If you could just change your point of view, if you could think for 2 seconds that these children that are in the streets that are dying, and remember, there's something wrong with the society when its children are dying before its parents, and that includes war. But let's stick to addiction. If our children are dying before we're dying, there's something wrong. And if you could just turn your focus that these children are not problems, that these are tremendous, tremendous resources that we desperately need as a nation, and they're being wasted. Think how that would change how we might view treating them. You know, we've got a mindset on interdiction. We've had it for 50 years, and in case nobody's paying any attention, it's not working. You know, we got as many kids on drugs today as we had 20 years ago. Violent crime is worse than it's ever been, and they would keep locking them up. I mean, when is somebody going to get the message? Well, I don't want the message. Are you kidding? I don't have to give up my Beamer and drive a goddamn Chevy. I don't. It's going to take money to fix these children. We're going to have to raise an entire generation with self-esteem. Well, that means changing the entire educational system, because the educational system is not set up to raise children with self-esteem. And if you're teachers, I'm sorry, and I'm not here to hammer you. And I believe that you went into the system with every good intention of making a difference, and you probably, too, have been as hammered by the system as the very children who are in your classroom. You know, I'm not after you. I'm after the system, because it does not nurture children, and it does not celebrate differences and uniqueness. And at the minute you stop celebrating the difference and the uniqueness of the child, we're finished. I mean, Barbara Streisand said the most powerful thing of all the pre-inaugurational stuff when she said, what you do to your children is what they're going to do to the society. When are we going to get that? If children are being battered at home, they're not going to come out loving and caring for their neighbor. They're going to come out battering somebody. You see? And if people are being battered as children, they're going to come out either battering or being battered, setting themselves up in that situation one more time. I can understand how you can batter a child. I understand real easy. There are times my daughter becomes really entrenchant upon, is that the word? Yeah, entrenchant upon some little idea of hers, and my immediate instinct is to slug her. It's the very first thing I want to do is slug this child. Now, I adore this child. I am hopelessly in love with my daughter. She is the brightest little star in my universe. Why do I want to slug her? Because it's my belief system. It's what was done to me, and it works, and I know it. You see, I know if I slug her, I'll shut her up. Okay?
Now, I don't, because I also built into myself a capacity to count 10. So this child has never been struck by her parents. Yelled at?
a couple of times. And it's so goddamn embarrassing to sit on the floor with a 4-year-old and tell her apologize for yelling. You know, I feel so stupid. I mean, but I have to do it, because if I don't do it, I invalidate her. And so I'm sitting there saying, okay, look, I'm not mad at you, okay? I love you. I'm mad at what you did, not you. This is an action you took, and I'm mad at the action, and I yelled, and I really shouldn't yell. Yelling is not okay, and I am very sorry that I yelled at you.
You should be. It hurt my feelings. Made me feel bad.
Well, there's always been such conflict between feelings and God and spirituality, and we have religions that are set up and they exclude people. It's it's like if you believe in a God that excludes anybody, you missed it. You missed it somewhere. I don't know where, but you missed it. And so, and I thought feelings were like a foreign thing. Feelings are like something which should be avoided, and yet this angelic little girl is born to my wife and myself, and she arrived from God with a full package of feelings. We didn't teach her any of them. This little girl could get so sad, and the little face would go down, and the tears would start, and I just want to die. I have seen our daughter laugh so hard she has fallen off her feet. When's the last time you laughed like that? My whole life was lived from here to here. I used to laugh. It used to be, that's funny. That's it. It's the best you got out of me. That's all I had to give. And horror of horrors. This angelic, blonde-haired, blue-eyed little angel, female child, got mad. I mean, mad. She used to sit there on the floor before she could walk, and she'd get mad, and she'd double up her fists so tight they'd turn blue. She'd cut off the circulation. She'd furrow her brow, and she'd be screaming at the top of her lungs. Ah! Her face would be red like a fire truck. This spot right here between her eyes would be white because she cut the circulation off there too, furrowing her brow so hard. And suddenly she realized she was constricted, sitting there like this. Ah! And so she'd throw her head back. Ah, that's better. She could really get loud. Then she'd throw her arms out. Ah, that's better. And then she'd just throw herself back on the floor so she could be spread eagle, right? Ah! And scream, right? Well, we'd read enough books to know that you stay in the same room so they know what they're doing is okay, and if they're physically blocking the door, you step over them, and that's it, and you let her get this anger out, right? I watched this little angel learn to express her anger appropriately without injuring herself or others. A couple of months later, after she'd been in this, getting this stuff out, she'd be doing the same thing, sitting there, fist doubled up, brow furrowed, screaming, spot white, face red. Ah! Realized she was constricted, head back, arms out, and then she'd go. Because, see, a couple of times she'd been too close to the wall, right? So she was learning to appropriately express her anger without injuring herself. If she was too close to the wall, she'd just scoot forward a few feet and then back she'd go, right? Well, I watched this process of this child and these feelings, and I began to get the message that the feelings are God-given. And yet they're the very things I ran from all my life. They're the very things that were smashed when I was a child. Yet the hope for the human race depends upon my being in touch with my feelings, not out of touch with my feelings. The more in touch I become with my feelings, the more I care about my fellow man, and the more aware I become of the needs. And I believe this is what God had in mind. We're supposed to look after each other here. This is the whole idea. And if we can do that, then we're going to be okay. Well, when I'm shut off from my feelings, I don't look after you, or if I do, it's in a mechanical way that doesn't benefit you. And I don't have to do big things. I can do little things. Right? Once I got these feelings. Well, I watched this child and her feelings, and I'm understanding now how important feelings are to children. I mean, they're very powerful little people. If you're doing some of this work yourself in your own recovery, trying to figure out whether you were abused or not abused or this and that, I'll give you a real simple yardstick. A very, very simple yardstick. This is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. It is not okay to strike a child under any circumstances, for any reason, period. There is no excuse, there is no reason, and if you do it, it is abuse. And I will be happy to take anybody on, one-on-one, on that subject as soon as this talk is over, if you believe you can justify to me the striking of a child. And if you think it's not hard for me to teach this child and guide this child without punching her lights out, oh my God, is it work. I didn't know it could be this. My wife and I were tired the first 4 years. We would stand there in the kitchen when she was 2 saying, is it possible anyone this small can so destroy 2 adults? Is this really happening? We were always going to have 2 children, and by the time Alexander was 3 and it was time to make the decision to have the second one, we said, no. Let's leave that to somebody younger, man, with better mental health than me, And my problem with her is not only on the bad side and the punishing side, it's on the good, giving, nurturing side. Because I don't have these tools or these skills. One night when she was about 20 months old or so, she's in the bathtub. I'm bathing her, and there's this old, dirty, beat-up pink kangaroo sitting on the basin up by the sink. She wants to bathe this stuffed pink kangaroo suddenly. She has an idea. It's interesting. These children are full of, spontaneous ideas. I want to bathe the kangaroo. Well, my immediate reaction to bathing the kangaroo is as follows.
No, you can't bathe the kangaroo. It's stuffed. It's filled with sawdust. The sawdust is going to get wet, and then it's going to dry, and it's going to be stinky, and it's going to rot the threads, and they're going to fall apart, and the sawdust is going to be all over the house. You can't bathe the kangaroo. I thank my mother for her input from the grave. And I let all that run through without saying a word to my child. And then I look at the kangaroo, and I look at her, and I look at the kangaroo, and I think, why not? Who cares, right? Give her the kangaroo, bottle of Johnson's baby shampoo, and she goes to work, right? Mound of suds. Kangaroo disappears under the suds, right? Time to get out of the bath. Dad takes kangaroo, we stick it under the faucet, turn on the water, rinse kangaroo off, wring him out, right? Wring her out, I should say. My daughter corrects me constantly on this one. Oh, that's a cute bear. What's his name? Her name. Wring the kangaroo out, and we march off down the hall to put the kangaroo in the dryer. Put kangaroo in the dryer, close the door, set the timer for 40 minutes. My daughter and I leave the laundry room with 2 different sets of feelings. She's excited, happy, and anticipating the results. Dad knows the only way you're going to get the kangaroo out of the dryer is with the dustbuster, okay? Because Dad has such a positive belief system, given as thanks to the folks. 40 minutes later, we come back, we open up the drawer of the dryer, and out comes this fluffy, pink, beautiful kangaroo. Small child grabs kangaroo by ear, and down the hall she goes, thrilled. It was her idea. She was allowed to execute it, and it worked. And I also let her execute ideas that I know aren't going to work, and they don't work. And she learns it doesn't work. It's very hard for me not to jump in and try and protect her from stuff. See, that's as damaging as hitting them. If you can't let them have that space. So this is part of. I'll give you another side of her. One night when she was about 22 months old, I guess I got to get over here because I got to walk. So I can hope you hear me while I do this. She was about 22 months old. It's a couple of months after the kangaroo incident. We were living in a small town in northern Arizona, a real rural town, beautiful area. I won't go into the rest of living there, but here. Yeah, anyway. No, I could do an hour on okay, so one side of the town is these Hualapai Mountains. They are just gorgeous. And the other three sides of the town, which sits in this little valley, almost about 3,000 feet up in the desert, it's high desert, are mesas, or these beautiful tabletop mountains. So we're out where there's nothing. We're walking up the road that night, Tina and I, and we call her Sasha, that's her nickname, in between us. And she's walking south, in between us. So we're going very slow up this road. So she's walking south in between us, and up at the end of the road is this mesa, and sitting on top of it is the moon. Big, full moon, like a plate, just sitting there. And we're walking along real slow, this little person in front of us, and suddenly she starts going like this. She starts going, "Oh," she says, "oh, Sasha's flying." She goes, "Oh, Sasha's flying through the air. Oh, Sasha's flying in the air. Oh, Sasha's holding the moon." 22 months old. Where'd she get that stuff? Tina and I looked at each other and we were just sobbing, both of us as parents. And we said, "My God, do you know that it's possible that this child's spirit is so free that she may just have flown to the moon?" We don't know, see, because no one's ever stepped on her spirit. And ours were smashed as children, so I don't have anything to relate to. I can't tell you. All I can tell you is that's out of a 22-month-old little girl walking up the road who believes that she can fly and the moon is hers. And the moon is hers. It's about power. When her grandmother died, we went, running for books. We believe in information. Gather information. Get information. Threaten your belief system. Go to workshops, lectures. You know we're going to make you uncomfortable. Get ground up a little bit. Get some stuff in that just makes you turn left a little bit or right a little bit. Anything that gets you out of either or thinking, this rigid thinking, that's the killer, see? I mean, the name of Alice Miller. And in that book, because she talks about rigidity in children and how damaging it is. And in that book, one of the things that she points out, which is really interesting, is like Rudolf Hess, the commandant of Auschwitz, was not raised to be a commandant of a concentration camp. I mean, his mom and dad did not say, "Well, boy, look at him. This guy's going to be really good. We can set him out there. He'll knock off a couple of million people, no problem at all. Let's nurture him in that direction," right? That was not how he was raised. Rudolf Hess was raised to be a priest. He was raised to be obedient at all costs to elders, no matter what. He was raised to be a priest. Frightening stuff. Frightening stuff. So, knowing we don't have information, suddenly one day we take Tina's mom to the doctor. We get the word, now cancer has set in with the emphysema. 6 weeks maybe. Mom is a member of Hemlock Society. We know she's going to pull the plug long before the 6 weeks is up. We just don't know when. Off to the bookstores we go. Now we're looking for a book that we can find with a concept of death that we can explain to a 3-year-old because, I don't know what to tell her. Remember, I'm from the family that nobody ever died in except, all I can tell is my kid is whatever you do in your entire life, don't get on a train, So finally we find a beautiful, beautiful story called Up on the Ridge. Up on the Ridge? Yeah, Up on the Ridge. Beyond the Ridge. And it's a story about this Native American grandmother, and she's laying on the floor of the teepee, and she's dying, and her children and grandchildren are gathered around her. And while she's laying there dying, she can hear her children's voices and her grandchildren's voices, and then she hears another voice, softer, farther away, calling to her. And her spirit leaves her body and begins to climb this ridge. And the voice keeps calling to her, saying, come closer. Can't you hear your mother? Your mother is calling to you. And finally she goes up over the top of the ridge.
and over the top of the ridge is the land of many teepees, and it's buffalo and flowers and her own mother and father and friends who have been dead, and she is there. And then, and what makes the book really powerful for my belief system is they go on beyond in the book. They don't stop it there with that belief. They go on beyond to the actual ceremony of the body, where the children and the grandchildren take the grandmother's body and out and put it in the tree to send it back to the earth, the universe. So we read her this book over and over, and she likes this book. I mean, it's okay. And she begins to get it that Grandma is going, but that there'll be something of her left somewhere. And so she can go in and she can put her head down on her grandmother's stomach in her room, and she can pat her grandma on the chest and say, "Bye-bye, Dee Dee." She called her grandmother her Dee Dee. It's really sad. Boy, it broke my heart watching her do that. Made me feel good, broke my heart. I lived my whole life like that with my daughter. Makes me feel good and I want to die. So she's patting her on the chest, and she's saying bye-bye to her Dee Dee. And right up to the end, we kept her at home. We let her die at home. We let her die in her own bed. We laid with her while she was dying. And I should touch on that for a minute. When Tina's parents met me, they hated me. The feeling was mutual. They were two alcoholic parents who, as far as I was concerned, were losers. They'd been abusive. They were killing themselves in their old age, smoking, drinking. Just forget it, right? We did not hit it off. We worked things out. When her dad died, the only male in his life in the hospital, sitting at his bedside, holding him, was me. When it came time for Dorothy to go, the only male in her life in the bed holding her, telling her it's going to be okay, as she was dying, was me. I like recovery. It's powerful stuff. Grandma dies. Actually, not only does Grandma die, two of our dogs die. One 2 days before, one 3 days after. It was a nightmare. A Labor Day weekend that was an absolute nightmare for grieving. And so she's grieving the loss of the dogs, and she's grieving the loss of her grandmother. And it goes on pretty okay for a while. Now remember, I'm out of this mode that you show nobody your feelings ever under any circumstances for any reason, because I'm a street kid. And if you showed anybody anything, they're going to take it wrong, and they're going to think somehow you got a weakness and you don't ever want to show anybody a weakness. So that's how I deal with it. So my daughter, she'd be walking through the house and she'd get this little sad face, and tears would start to come, and she'd say, "I'm sad, I miss my Dee Dee." And my wife, who is a walking basket of feelings and doesn't care where she is or who's there and can express them openly, would immediately scoop her daughter to her breast, and they would stand there crying together over Grandma being gone. I like this. I can handle this. This is grieving. This is okay. This is in a frame that I understand. It's working pretty okay. I'm having a little trouble in restaurants with my wife, but other than that, it's okay. Because we'd be out in a restaurant, some small, intimate bistro in Tucson, having this candlelight dinner, and she'd suddenly remember some tender moment between her and her mom and start to sob. And my wife does not sob delicately. So she's gorgeous anyway, which draws enough attention without sitting at the goddamn table crying, right? Now, I would like to tell you, after 30 years of recovery, I'm so contained and so well and so put together that this doesn't bother me, her crying in public. Not true. It's all I can do not to stand up in the restaurant and scream, "It has nothing to do with me, okay? You got it? Right? I'm not having an affair, okay? And I didn't ask for a divorce. Her mother died, all right?" I'm just not that free yet with my feelings. One night, I don't remember now, about 3 months after our Dee Dee died, we're in bed, sound asleep, and a scream comes out of our daughter's room that is the most frightening scream I've ever heard in my life. My immediate thought, because I've been burned and I know how painful it is to be burned, my immediate thought was that someone was branding her skin with a branding iron, and that was the pain that she was feeling. We ran down the hall to her room. She's sitting up in bed, holding her gawky, her blanket, screaming at the top of her lungs. This scream was like, "Ah!" And it was just from the depth of her soul. It was the most frightening thing I have ever heard in my life. And she did not want to be touched. She did not want to be talked to. She did not want to be bothered. So doing what we do, we sat down by her bed on the floor next to her and let her scream this horrible, filled the house, the desert around the house, it filled everything. But it was about 12, somewhere between 12 and 20 minutes the first time, and all she did was scream. I got terrified at one point. I thought we've lost her. I thought she's gone, man. She's made a split here, and she's history, and we're never going to get her back. At the end of this 12 to 20 minute period in there somewhere, she stopped crying, looked at her mother and I sitting on the floor, stopped screaming, and tears started to come down her face. And she said, I'm upset because my Dee Dee's gone. And I thought, my God. She was to do this 2 more times over the next month and never since. And Tina and I talked about the power of this little tiny person's feeling. My therapist always said children's number one problem is their size, because everybody diminishes everything because they're small. They think their stuff is small, and it's not small. And we were stunned at this power of this child, the depth of her grieving. And let me tell you about her grandma for a minute, okay? Her grandmother was almost absolutely, totally incapable of physical affection. She maybe held her granddaughter on her lap 12 times in the 3 years that they were together. It wasn't, but she adored her. Oh, don't misunderstand me that she didn't love her granddaughter. I mean, I'm convinced she stayed around for her. Because her husband of 50 years died. She really didn't want to be here, and except for the small fry, you know. So this child, even with that relationship, that's the depth of her grieving, and that's the depth of her pain for this grandma, her Dee Dee. And she still misses her Dee Dee. And she misses her doggies, who have been explained to her by her mom, who I lovingly refer to as my in-house witch. And I realize how dangerous it is saying that in Virginia, but I'll let it go anyway. Because she has taught her that the dogs are all in a spirit dog pack. Because we've lost a lot of dogs, and that they're protecting her. And so she knows the names of all her dogs, and she knows that they're in a spirit dog pack, and they're around somewhere, and they protect her. And I say that about my wife because if there's 4 women gathered anywhere in the wilderness with drums in the middle of the night burning bat wings, my wife would be there with them. And the reason she would be there with them is she has this incredibly awesome, powerful sense of being connected to the earth and all things that have to do with the earth. I mean, she's had it ever since I've known her. And so when she takes our daughter, like we have a jacuzzi that just sits out in the desert. I mean, it's just in the middle, not inside the yard, not inside the walls, not in anything. It just sits out in the desert. And their ritual at night is she and Sasha, Tina and Sasha, go out and they sit in the jacuzzi and they look at the stars and the moon and feel the desert breeze and listen to the critters in the desert. Because we have everything around the house, coyotes and javelinas and rabbits and rats and all of it, just like walking down your driveway, you know, where we are. So I have a little girl who's 5 years old who's getting this sense, she believes the moon is hers. She believes the stars are there to entertain her. She believes she's a child of the desert. And she will, if you give her a choice to watch a video, movie or something on TV, she oftentimes will choose going out and sitting in the desert at night where it's quiet and listening, feeling the breeze on her face and listening to the animals. This is the gift. See, this really touches me because this is the gift my wife is giving our daughter. See, and I grew up in the streets, and I didn't know any of that shit, you know, and I grew up hurting people and angry, and you didn't want to know me when I was a young man. I was too big and too dangerous to be anywhere near me, and it's just so sad. I had no sense that death was wrong or that the breeze was wonderful or the moon was mine. I didn't think anything was mine unless I took it. It didn't matter unless you could put it in your arm, drink it, or spend it, you know. That was my world, see. And I have this little girl, and she just walks out there, and we take her for hikes in the mountains, and she just thinks it's hers. Hers. And she looks around. It's a very slow hike. You don't go far, you know. She inspects absolutely everything, every inch of the way, Sticks, twigs, rocks, she's right there doing this stuff. So, my hope is, now genetically this kid is screwed, okay? If there's anything to genetic predisposition to alcoholism, so we're smart. We're setting aside a bail bond fund before the college fund, okay? We are aware someone may offer her a beer, and it could be a couple years before we get her back. The one thing I have noticed more recently than at any time ever is young people who have genetic predisposition to addiction, who have been raised in a nurturing environment, spend an absolute minimum amount of time actively practicing the addiction because it's unacceptable to their being to put themselves through that kind of torture. And they call it quits when they're very, very young. They don't run it out a long time. And so that's my prayer for my daughter. If she is in fact predisposed to it, and she does in fact drink or get into drugs, that it will be a very short run for her. It's really just... I hope it's not an emergency of any kind. Someone left their lights on, perhaps. Oh, stop it, Bob. So what can I tell you? I believe that addiction is is a result of family dysfunction. I believe we need to change the family system and structure in our nation. I believe that this is the only hope for children, is to empower them and to nurture them, to let them express their feelings, to celebrate their uniqueness, to see our adolescents that are suffering so greatly today as resources instead of problems, so that we can just shift ourselves a little bit to give them a hand. I believe that treatment needs to be a part of absolutely any kind of policy or plan. I'm not a supporter of managed care. I think it's killing people, literally killing people. I don't mean figuratively, literally, that we have uninformed people sitting in an office thousands of miles away from the site where somebody's being treated, and they are... that's okay. Go ahead and wait 10 minutes. I got it. I know, I live that kind of life, man, where it's urgent to get to the grocery store on time, It's like, that's how I get out of my feelings today. I get hyper vigilant. I just get busy. I don't remember what I was saying. Oh, yeah, oh, God, yeah, right. Making decisions on people's lives from thousands of miles away, and they're uninformed, and people are leaving treatment and killing themselves. I hope they wake up one of these days. It's sad. Has treatment had its abuses? I can only think of Brawley Hills when I think of that. Let's fly them in on champagne flights for treatment. Yes, it has, and certainly there needs to be some sense of control somewhere, but I don't think managed care is it. What else do you think, Bob? Well, nobody really cares. Okay. I have a lot of conversations with myself. The upside of all this is that the dysfunction in the Webster family and the dysfunction in the Earl family has stopped with our daughter. And that's one of the most exciting things that there is. It stopped. My family's trash has stopped. Thank God. It doesn't have to go on to one more kid. One more, because that's all. It's just handed down, and it's just, it came over on the boat. One of the best lines I ever heard is, Europe is the alcoholic parent and America is the adult child. There's a lot of truth in that. There is. There's an awful lot of truth in that. So the results of, or what? 30 years of recovery, I'm a completely changed human being. Completely changed. I'm a good husband, faithful, I'm a loving father. I like me. I'll be walking by a store window somewhere sometimes, I'll catch a glimpse of my reflection, and I'll look over at this guy and I'll smile. This is a good man. It's a good man. I never had those feelings about him. And these are drug-free feelings. I didn't get these chemically. This is a good man. I'm a member of my society that I live in. I care about it. I participate in it. I'm aware of what's going on in it. I get mad. I write letters. I try and do something when I can. Not a lot, not big things. I've already been through the ideal. You could freeze yourself with wanting to do the ideal thing, and I've done that, paralyzed myself from action. I've sat around the house for years thinking, if they just asked me to come to Washington, just one time, just let me talk to one Senate committee that has absolute power over children, and let me just talk to them for a minute, give them some information for a couple of hours. They'll go away to a closed-door session. They'll agree with everything that I had to say, and then they'll go into the full Senate, and they will enact legislation that will finally make the children important. Our tax dollars will follow our children, and until they follow our children, we're screwed as a country if we ever hope to compete, and everything will be beautiful. So while I'm sitting home thinking all that, nothing's going on. Not a thing's happening. So we learn to take stuff we don't need and put it in the car and take it down to the shelter for battered women and children, so that there's money to provide a place for a child that's been hurt. We participate where we can. When parents are needed at the preschool, we're there. The other morning we went to check out a new kindergarten, and Tina was sitting with Sasha in her lap, and this room was full because so many people want to get in this kindergarten. And I was standing back against the wall watching my daughter sit in my wife's lap, and I started to cry. Because both her parents were there with her. She looked around, looked at me, and smiled. Man, nobody ever came in my family. I mean, nobody came for Mother and Son's Day. Nobody came for Father and Son's Day. And as a junior high student in the city of Los Angeles, I competed in the Junior Olympics in the Coliseum in Los Angeles. Won a medal. I don't even remember what in. That's how important that was. And nobody was there. Nobody came. Nobody came. My daughter, she turns around. One of or both of us is always there for her at events. We need to change our thinking. It's hard. It's hard. It's really, really hard. It's hard to change this belief system. Very hard. But I think we've got enough information now to prove that the old way is not working. It is not working. What do they say? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. God, that just makes me think about our legislature. Well, life goes on. So, on that note, you've been a great audience, and I got a couple minutes if anybody has a absolute burning, killing question. Otherwise, we can quit and the smokers can go get some relief, and we can have lunch. Are we done? You've been a great audience. I want to applaud your courage for coming to get information. Thank you. God bless you.